I have been seeing more and more desserts including a miso caramel, and you know me, I'm obsessed with anything caramel, so I figured I had to get this into one of my macarons. So here we go. I'm starting off with just a basic caramel that you've seen me make before. I'm starting with a dry caramel, which means there's no liquid in here. I have a saucepan that I have over kind of a low heat. I'm adding in a little bit of sugar and I'm going to wait for this to completely melt before I add in a little bit more and a little bit more. The goal here is not to let this sugar and the caramel in there developing. We don't want that to overheat or burn before all of the sugar is incorporated, which is why we need to go on a relatively low heat. And also we don't want this to crystallize. So working with super clean, oil, grease-free saucepans, cooking utensils, all of that is hugely important, even more than usual when you are making a caramel. Now, as I start getting more and more sugar incorporated into this caramel, I am going to get in there. I generally like to use like a small metal whisk. You can use a wooden spoon or whatever works well for you, just to make sure that the sugar doesn't clump up too much and the heat is distributed really evenly. The other thing just to be aware of is not to add too much sugar at once. If you add a lot of sugar, just think about it. That sugar is at room temperature, and the caramel that you're creating in the saucepan is caramelizing, but it's still a relatively small amount and it is on a pretty low heat. So if you dump in a bunch of a dry ingredient that is at a much cooler temperature, it's going to really shock the caramel that is developing, and it's going to lower that temperature really drastically, really quickly. So if we dumped in all the remaining sugar right now, what would happen is instead of just nicely incorporating and melting along with the rest of the caramel and sugar, it would instead kind of bead up all of the caramel that's in there, and you would just end up with this like grainy, lumpy mess in your saucepan, and it would take a while to remelt everything. So just go, pretty low, pretty slow, nothing crazy. This is also something you probably don't want to multitask. I would just stand there and keep your focus on your caramel. As soon as all of the sugar is incorporated, I am going to be putting my cream in here to deglaze this sugar. That is why you saw me put my cup with the cream in my microwave before. If you have a second small saucepan, you can also just bring that to a scald next to you on another burner. But either way, again, thinking about temperatures here, we know that the sugar is going to be really, really hot. So if we add in a cold or even room temperature cream, it's going to be too much of a shock to the system for that caramel, and the result is not going to be as good. So after all of the sugar is incorporated, everything is completely dissolved, there are no grains of sugar that we can see, the mixture starts smoking, then we're going to pour in our warmed cream. Does not have to be hot, like hot. It does not have to be actively like simmering or boiling or anything, but it does have to be warm. Then when I am adding the cream in, I am going to pull it off the heat just to make sure that it doesn't just completely boil over when I get to that point. Okay, so I am getting to that point where all my sugar is incorporated. If I look at this, I am just seeing caramel. I'm not seeing like granules of sugar in there. I'm just looking for this to get to a really nice deep color and to see some smoke rising from this pan before I turn off the heat and start adding in the cream, not all at once, even though it seems like a small amount. Pour it in a little bit at a time, stirring each time because this will bubble up, as you can see here. After I get all of the cream incorporated into this, I am going to turn on the heat one more time just to make sure everything is as thoroughly emulsified as it possibly can be. Then at that point, I am going to take it off the heat once and for all. It's time to add in the final ingredients. Okay, I pulled that saucepan off the heat. My caramel is ready. Now I have my room temperature unsalted butter and some sea salt. That is super important. If you add in salted butter, you cannot control the ratio of butter to salt. That is out of your hands. So even though I'm adding in salt separately, do not just replace the salt and butter with salted butter. Those are two separate things here. After all of the butter, again, room temperature, unsalted, after all of that is incorporated, the last thing I'm going to do is introduce the miso paste to my caramel. Then I'm going to just let this sit. I want it to cool down completely before I dive into this. While that caramel is cooling down, let's work on these macaron shells. I have got 2 spatulas, 2 bowls, and otherwise pretty normal ingredients because I have 2 colors that I want to make these macaron shells. I'm going with the French method today, so I've got my almond flour, powdered sugar, egg whites, sugar, a little bit of cream of tartar, and then I've got a little bit of yellow food coloring. I've got 2 different piping tips, and I made myself a little egg template. All you gotta do is go online to your favorite search engine, type in the word egg, and then put it into a Google Doc and print it off. There we go, egg template. I'm going to be making like a hard-boiled egg looking macaron for kind of Easter, but I also think you can do this any time of the year, especially for like brunch or something. It is one of the cutest egg themed macarons I have ever made, and I have made a couple because, you know, Easter themed macaron boxes are pretty popular. So I have experimented with quite a few, and this is by far my favorite. So I've got my meringue whipping here. I am using the French method, so I just have my room temperature egg whites there, whipping up, introducing my sugar and cream of tartar, and continuously whisking until I've reached a really nice stiff peak. Then I'm going to start folding in all of my dry ingredients. That would be the almond flour and powdered sugar. Of course, I did sift these together before I started baking to make sure I wouldn't have any lumps or things like that in my macaron shells. If you don't want to sift your almond flour and powdered sugar, another option would be to food process them, or you can just kind of risk it and just use them as is, but just know both of those ingredients are a bit prone to having little clumps in them, and that could end up in your macaron shell. So if you are going for the smoothest possible macaron shell, doing something like sifting or food processing is a really good idea. I am incorporating the dry ingredients in about 3 additions, just to make sure that everything incorporates really smoothly and I don't end up with pockets of dry ingredients everywhere. As soon as everything is incorporated, I'm going to start what we call the macaronage process, where I am kind of folding and pressing my dough against the sides of the bowl, which is why I really like to do mini batches like this in a larger, wider bowl, just so I can visualize everything and get some really nice folding motions going on here until I reach a ribbon stage. However, because I want some of this to be a different color, as soon as I stop seeing dry ingredients, I'm going to pause, pull out a little bit of this batter so that I'm macaronaging in 2 separate bowls 2 separate times. Because I am kind of waiting until this late stage to do the addition of another color, I am opting for a gel food colorant because I find that incorporates a little bit more quickly and seamlessly at this stage in the process. All right, so I've got that white portion of batter to the ribbon stage. That's going to be for kind of the white part of the egg. And now I'm going for the yolk part of the egg. And as soon as I got this yellow in here, I realized, oh no, I want it to look more like a jammy, hard-boiled egg vibe, like, the really delicious kind of eggs you get in your ramen. And so I quickly stopped mixing and added in just a little bit of orange because I wanted it to look more like that. That was a last minute decision. I do not recommend mixing a little bit and then adding more gel food colorant and mixing again, but it's fine. It all worked out. You'll see it in a second. So this is also getting to the ribbon stage. It's a lot harder to know what is the ribbon stage when you're working with such a tiny amount of batter. So I guess just do your best to understand what the consistency of your macarons feels like. Then I've got the batter transferred into 2 separate piping bags, again, because the yolk part is going to go on top of the white part of the egg. So first, I'm just going to follow my template. If you don't have an egg template and don't want to make your own, you can just go by your circle template, and instead of creating a perfect circle, just start a little bit above the top of your circle, and you can just pipe kind of in like almost a teardrop, but with a rounded top part, of course, kind of going with that circle as a guideline. Otherwise, yeah, super easy to just print off an egg template. Go around there. I experimented a bit. Do I like starting at the bottom or the top or the middle? And the verdict's still out on that. I don't really know. But either way, just do your best to have an egg-like shape. You might also know, if you've watched any of my previous shape macaron videos, I am not a person who enjoys using a scribe tool. I just do not. I know a lot of people out there love it. They love poking and popping little air bubbles and making sure every little part is perfect. I think that's great. I also think, for me personally, it's a huge waste of my time. So I would rather see a few streaks or lines, or even have some tiny air bubbles, over having spent all of those minutes going through and making sure every single thing is perfect. So just putting this out there, creating the perfect egg shape is a little bit challenging, especially when you're starting off. So if you are a person who likes using a scribe tool, go for that. Have a lot of fun. If you are not, it is okay. I think it is perfectly okay, especially because in the kind of lower half there, I'm putting that yolk. And so if you have any where you do have kind of a rougher, streakier moment there, it's fine. It will be covered up in a second. So after piping that full tray, I gave the tray just a little bit of a tap. Then on half of them, I'm going through and just piping straight down, making like a mini macaron circle for the egg yolk. I did wait probably from start to finish. It was like a couple minutes, like 2 minutes, 3 minutes between when I piped the macarons, the white part of the macaron, and when I added on the yolk, and they baked up perfectly fine. I think if you're nervous about it, you could wait a couple more minutes. But yeah, I think piping directly on macaron batter is pretty safe and easy to do, especially when it's nothing too terribly detailed. I really do like to make sure, though, that my shaped macarons, especially when there are multiple colors or layers like this, have really thoroughly rested before they go into the oven. So I think I let these rest for like 25-30 minutes. Again, depending on your kitchen and situation, that might be longer or shorter of a time. Then I baked them just like normal. These ones were about 16 minutes in my 300-degree Fahrenheit oven. Then after they were completely cooled, I matched them up so I could decorate them. I just wanted something really simple here, and because Gudetama is like my favorite character in the entire world, I didn't want these to be exactly Gudetama, but that was kind of the vibe I was generally going for, in that it was just like a very simple egg with kind of a silly expression on it. So I did just use a black food coloring pen If you wanted to use something like royal icing, or you even could have done this with macaron batter, or you could also use food coloring but paint it on if you'd rather use a really tiny brush. Whatever you want and whatever facial expression you want. Like if you want these to be super cute, if you want them to be like kind of weird, I don't know. Whatever you want, I think is a good decision. I went for more like a really solid mix of everything. So some of them I didn't add a face onto, and then all of the other ones I basically gave them all completely different faces, and I found that to be very, very enjoyable. Okay, let's dig into this caramel. Because of the addition of miso in there, it is thick. It is a really thick caramel. The taste is really lovely. The miso is subtle, but it adds this really, really phenomenal, like salty umami vibe to the macaron shell. Of course, I put some of that miso caramel into some vanilla buttercream, and then I'm putting the miso caramel on the inside, just like any of my caramel macarons. What I really like about this flavor for this egg macaron is that the caramel and the buttercream sort of mimic what the egg is doing, you know, the white part of the egg and the egg yolk. So even though it's not like a super in your face like white and yellow pairing, I do think that it matches really, really well if you are making a hard-boiled egg inspired macaron. If you wanted to add some additional flaky sea salt to the top after you pipe the caramel in there, absolutely go for it. If you are more of the salt and the miso that's already in the caramel is enough kind of a person, then absolutely you do not have to add any more salt to the top of this. That is completely up to you. Then just sandwich these, get them into your refrigerator to mature. Depending on the person, this might take a day or two. Sometimes buttercream filled macarons take a little bit longer to mature than something with ganache, so just keep that in mind. I really hope you enjoyed this miso caramel egg macaron tutorial. I had so much fun making these macarons. If you give them a try, make sure to tag me on Instagram so I can see your end results. I love seeing all of the things you guys create. If you're not already following me there at Maddie Brame or on TikTok at Macarons by Maddie, make sure to do that and subscribe down below so you don't miss out on a future video. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Bye!